I think we're going to get started. I'm right away going to point to the star attraction, which is the set of these 4 college leaders and presidents sitting to my left, Scott, Brent, Judy, and Mike. We've cheated and violated an ASU+GSV rule by handing out a one-pager. It's illegal. They told us not to do it. We did it anyway. And I think the teacher in me wants to make you sit silently for 30 seconds and read it, but I won't. But please do look at it. That's allowed. Because it'll tell you a little bit about who you will hear from today. They're remarkable people running remarkable institutions, and the quality of these institutions that we'll talk about today is their commitment to producing economic outcomes for their students, by which, in plain English, we mean economic safety, economic opportunity, good jobs, and wages. This is the outcome in American higher education on which almost all students will agree. 80% of students who attend U.S. higher ed say that a better job and a better wage is either their primary or one of their primary reasons for going. It's also the only outcome that you can get almost every politician in American society to agree on as worthwhile. And so it is the popular and the political and public policy basis for higher ed, let's say. That is not to exclude other outcomes. We'll talk about that today. You can care about a good job and a good wage and care about lots of other things as well. Today, we're going to talk about the economic outcomes. I will try very hard to leave time in the last 5 or 10 minutes for some questions. I can't promise anything because I don't control these people. But that is my goal, so stick around for that. And so without further ado, what I'd like to do is just give each of the 4 of you, Brent, I'll just call on you because your blazer just caught my eye. It's a good-looking one, so for that reason, you get to start, Brent. But it's a really easy opening question to all of you, which is just open up a little bit to the audience about what this term economic outcome means to you, and maybe address one thing, which is how would a student or a mom and a dad or a household know from the outside looking in that you care about economic outcomes? Please at least touch on that, but otherwise just open up and we'll whip around on that. Go ahead, Brent.
Yeah, sure. Thanks very much, Stig. Thank you all for being here. So at Bentley University, I think that we have historically relied on data, factual data. You've got some of it in front of you. Much of the data doesn't come from us, but whether it's Scholar Scorecard or other credible sources, we are fundamentally, relentlessly, and I think to some degree uniquely focused rather exclusively on the outcomes and success of our students. And we define that by our capacity to transfer skills that pass the market test. And so for us, that means job placement consistently at about 98, 99%, some of the highest salaries in the country. It means some of the most sought-after students after graduation. And most critically, and the final thing I'll say about that is, as those outcomes are even after we control for income from students. So we have a big push, first generation, lower economic sort of strata students, and they have the identical outcomes. And that's what we think parents see and kids see when they look at our institution.
Yes, you can decide amongst you. You want me to call on you? Okay, in that case, Mike, go ahead, please.
I'll go next. I'm Mike Reeser, and I serve at Texas State Technical College. We are the 2-year technical college system in Texas. We're not part of the community colleges nor the universities. We are an independent system. We do all workforce, occupational-oriented programs all the time, and it's all we do. So the first answer to your question is, people know that when they go to TSTC, they're going there because there's a particular profession that they seek to fulfill. The second reason that folks know is because our public funding is earned in a way that's unlike any other we've ever seen anywhere. and that is our public funding is earned when our students get placed in the Texas workplace. Not contact hours, not any sort of progress payments. We don't get paid until the student goes to work. And the more they make for the first 5 years that they're employed, the more public funding we earn. So we're the only college you've probably ever seen that gets paid public funding on a commission basis. And Texans know that. They know that means our best interests are perfectly aligned with those of the student. So that's how folks know, and probably why you invited me to be on the panel.
Yes.
Delighted to be here.
Judy, please.
Thank you. I think the outcomes around employment and internships opportunities are obvious. That's a metric of success for any university. At Quinnipiac University, which is a very comprehensive university in Connecticut. We do very well, like Bentley, with great outcomes. I think there's now a push towards looking at the delta of the before versus after, given the costs of the education, and I think the Department of Education will start testing for those kinds of outcomes. But I'm going to add a couple more metrics that I think are very important for economic outcomes. One is the speed at which students get degrees. Accelerated degrees are one metric of the economic impact. A second is the extent to which what we're teaching is relevant. So how are you co-creating curricula with employers in the region? I happen to also wear a hat of the co-chair of the governor's economic development and attraction arm, so I'm very interested in training people for the jobs in Connecticut. And so that relevancy obviously also translates into job employment and outcomes. I'm going to add one more, which I think is going to become, over the long term, a key economic success driver, and that is the mental health of students. Why? Because mental health translates into career trajectories, career persistence, family structures, health, all of which have economic impact. And we do know that now there is a crisis among young people with regard to their economic health, with regard to their mental health. And so when I think about a balanced scorecard, I think of all of those issues. I'll add one more nuance, and that is with regard to employment outcomes, we know that internships are a critical driver of employment outcomes because there's stickiness there. We also know, based on national data, that there's a difference between majority group and first generation attainment of internships. 40% versus 27% of graduates who are majority versus first generation have had the opportunity for internships, which of course propels them to a better first job and then to a better trajectory. So we also need to be looking at equity in terms of the attainment of these outcomes across different groups. So that's another one of those metrics.
I echo everything that they shared. A couple of the thoughts I would just offer is that one, you have to really be clear about the economic mobility as part of your fundamental mission as an institution. So I just would share with everyone here that WGU has a very clear and simple mission statement, which is to change lives for the better by creating pathways to opportunity. You'll notice that in that mission statement, there's no reference to education, there's no reference to competency-based, there's no reference to degrees and things like that. It just simply says this statement, that education is not an end in and of itself. It is a means to an end. Education's value is only realized once you start applying it, and that can be applied in a lot of different ways, but the fundamental way in which we see that being applied is the surest path to opportunity. And so when you're really clear about that in a mission statement, it becomes pretty simple to orient everything that you're doing. The second key thing that I would offer is that you have to be really clear as to who the primary beneficiary is of your mission and purpose as an institution. At WGU, we are not confused about that at all. The student is the primary beneficiary of the endeavor that we undertake. Everything else is secondary to that, even the employers, meaning even if we are providing talent pipelines for strategic partners and employers in the different workforces, like we're only delivering that value if in fact we delivered value to the student first. Now, for that to be really clear, we also then had to be very transparent and accountable for our key results, and ours are really simple, and they're all oriented towards this value proposition for the individuals. So if you start, then you should complete. I often joke about the fact that when we look at the sector as a whole and 40% of the individuals who start don't complete, there's no product in any other sector that business would continue with that kind of error rate. Now, I get the fact that we're dealing with humans, but the reality is when only 40% of individuals who start complete, that's really bad. It's worse when you consider that you have to be from a particular background or from a particular income strata to actually have a high probability of completing. That if you're a working adult and a learner who's trying to actually advance one's opportunity and career, but you have to fit education in your already busy life, after 8 years, not 4, after 8 years, only 25% of individuals from a working learner background will actually complete a bachelor's degree. So the first thing is you have to really focus on completion if you want to deliver economic value. If you start, you have to complete. Second, if you complete, was it actually worth it? Did you actually get a return on that? Did you gain the job? Does that job actually provide an economic benefit given the cost that you invested in it, et cetera? And that we could talk more about, but I think there's different ways in which we can understand that equation differently. The third, which is really important for us at WGU and should be for us overall, is that promise of education being a pathway to opportunity has to work for everyone. That's where our third key result of equity means that fundamentally that regardless of who you are, you should have an equal probability of attainment and success at WGU. We don't really care your background. What we care about is the fact that you're a human, that you have innate capacity for learning, that if given the opportunity, you all have something big to contribute, and it's our job to adapt to you, to increase that probability for you that you can in fact complete, and having completed, you're gonna get a great opportunity. To have that last part of that connect, by the way, is everything that was shared over here, is that it's really silly to develop degree programs or any credential program that has no market value. A couple years ago, we even used to say this very flatly. Credentials with no market value is a scam. The only one winning in that is an institution. You just paid them money to deliver something that has no value.
Thank you. I'm going to ask you about, so genuinely thank you. I'm going to take us into a question about what the day job looks like and what you have to fight through to produce the sorts of economic outcomes we're talking about here. And I'm going to collapse here the question so that you can address both the internal constraints that you face in your organizations, the culture of your organizations, the way they're governed perhaps, the kind of the routines or the legacy costs. But also feel free to comment about the external constraints you face in state and federal law among accreditors. All of you at various times have had to fight through these issues. You may be dealing with them now. You may have overcome them to various degrees. But, and Mike, I'm going to ask you to start on this one. And maybe just so we can speed us along, whoever of the other three of you feels most animated about this, right when Mike finishes, jump in and jump on the mic. Of course, you can only answer, but let's get at least two of you responding to that question. Mike, please start.
So 25 years ago, I arrived at TSTC as a manager, and what I found was a state bureaucracy that looked like the driver's license bureau, if you know what I mean. And we were filled with all sorts of dysfunctional self-interest groups. We weren't unified at all. The only thing that held us together is we all got our paycheck from the same source. And so what TSTC began was a transformation of culture. one in which we decided to forsake that notion of state agency and replace it with one of entrepreneurialism, one in which calculated risk-taking was going to be okay for everybody. And in order for that to happen, we had to create a culture of inclusion among all of these stakeholder groups that had been us before. So I think the short answer is we had to change everything. Partway through that transition, we were able to get our funding shifted so that the money that we followed, and everybody follows the money. All organizations follow the money. It shifted from activity to outcomes, and that became a new unifier. I'll add this. Accreditation and some other external stakeholders who have a say in how we do business can sometimes be slow to embrace innovators, and I'll just name that as a constraint.
I'm
Being
happy to
generous with slow.
I'm happy to pick up on the accreditor issue. Let me talk about two internal and two external. Obviously, resources are a driver. When you think about the rapid change in technologies, in advanced manufacturing, for example, that's one of the pillars of Connecticut's economy. You can't just say, hello, Tuesday we're becoming an advanced manufacturing degree provider here. You gotta get all the equipment, the tools, the labs, etc. So that, or robotics, that there are internal resource issues, even with AI, the infrastructure, the site licensing, the trainers, there's a resource issue. Then there's a human issue. Okay, if we're staying relevant in order to make sure that the students that we're training for outcomes that we all talked about are relevant, you need the people who can guide them there. That requires constant change. That is a human anxiety producer. I know what I do now. I'm not sure that I know what I'm supposed to do tomorrow. So those are two pretty significant internal constraints. On the outside, and I'll pick up here on what Mike was saying about accreditors, and I speak as a reformed chair of AACSB, the accrediting organization for all business schools globally. Accreditors are protectors of the status quo. Whether it's in our medical school where you got caps on enrollment that are very strict, or our health sciences, even though the market is crying for more people and we have the capacity for more people, the process of going through this accreditation lift is beyond excruciating. Or, for example, that you want to do 3-year degrees, accelerated degrees with, for example, reduced credits. Time is money. That's part of the return on the DNA. Again, I think there are maybe 2 accrediting bodies in the United States now. Western, maybe where you are, Scott, and maybe ours, NECHI. But it ain't easy. So the accrediting body, and God love them, but it is not, they're not going to lead us to the future. We have to really push and rattle the cage to get to the future. The other is the ranking organizations. Again, as a reformed business school dean that lived or died by whether we moved up or down by 1 point, here, and you saw this recently with the departure of all of the law schools from the rankings, there is, in many of the rankings, a metric that overwhelms, and that is not just placement, but salaries, starting salaries. Well, let me tell you, if you're going into entrepreneurship or pro-social organizations, you're not starting out with 6-figure incomes. You're actually doing something that is going to be potentially a multiplier in the economy, but your school is radically penalized for that lower starting salary. So
Judy,
the
you've said rankings and accreditation, and Scott's about to swallow his microphone.
Yeah. So I would just say those are two external constraints.
Go, Scott.
Yeah, could I just jump in on something, particularly for any of you who are at an institution? There are a couple things I just offer that you can control. Accreditors are what they are, rankings are what they are. You can't really choose not to participate in accreditation if you want Title IV. But what I would say is that you really should inspect the incentives that you have that reward the individuals that comprise your institution. The one simple, obvious one is that if faculty are actually incentivized to publish, to be cited, to advance research, et cetera, but that is not aligned with the outcomes for students. They're not being rewarded for what you want them to be doing if you have more of a focus on economic value proposition for the students you're serving. If they're being rewarded by how much research they advance, whether or not they secure grants, et cetera, like, they don't care about students. And so that's something that's really weird to me, being a foreigner to higher ed, even though I've been at WGU 8 years. I came from the private sector. It is notable that of the 4,000 roughly or so regionally accredited institutions, really about 100 of those need to be fundamentally core research institutions. The other 3,900, and yet they have all the same incentives for faculty as those research institutions do. That's an oddity. Second thing I would just offer is processes and practices are not oriented towards student success metrics around progress, pace, persistence, completion. And you have to obsess over those things to see really how are students doing in terms of developing mastery in the courses, how are they doing in passing their assessments, what are they doing to go from course to course if you have a traverse like we do, or you're even in a term. Are they progressing at a pace that they should be so that they're going to have a higher rate of persistence and ultimately completing? When we did that at WGU, it meant that now we have weekly review meetings where all we do is obsess around our student progress, pace, persistence, completion by every program in every school, trying to figure out whether or not we're delivering on what is ultimately going to matter for the student. That was even foreign to us at WGU. It's like we had to reorient everyone towards delivering that value proposition. That's something you have to consider because you have centuries-old model in most institutions that aren't oriented this way.
It occurs to me, thank you, Scott, everybody, I should just quickly introduce myself. I'm not a professional moderator. I think I'm obligated to tell you at least my name. It's Stig, Leschly, and since they mentioned accreditation, I'll also just share that I actually work at an organization that's trying to become an accreditor. It's called the Postsecondary Commission, and it's an accreditor that's very interested in measuring these wage outcomes and these economic mobility outcomes very carefully and very accurately. Which actually will bring me to my next question, which I'm going to direct joyfully to you, Brent, which is, I'll go back to something you said a few minutes ago, which is, in effect, to make sense of an outcome in an institution, to make sense of any outcome in an institution, you have to understand the students that the institution has decided to serve. So Brent runs an institution that has the same wage outcomes, last I checked, as MIT and as Harvard. He also runs an institution that admits much more courageously. And so my question is really a theme, I would say, Brent, which is how can we get to a place such that when we evaluate an institution for an outcome, we pay a lot of attention to its admissions office first, and we really try to find institutions like yours that are often hiding in plain sight doing extraordinary things because it is so committed to admitting all kinds of students and yet produces these extraordinary outcomes. What we need in terms of data and mindset shifts to really look at a value-added basis or an input-adjusted basis at these questions.
Yeah, thanks for that, Stig. As you're sort of listening to from my colleagues, I think much of what we appreciate at this conference is the distortions in the market with regard to higher education. I mean, think about it. We, in fact, celebrate when we admit students to universities in which hardly anyone is accepted to. And that is a success. If we look at the most elite institutions in the country, they graduate maybe 1.5% of students. We actually have active conversations about the importance of yield and admit rates at Bentley. I mean, frankly, I wish somebody referred earlier, I think it was my colleague who talked about the Navy SEALs. The Navy SEAls actually have a motto where we'll let you in. Like, anyone can get in. It's unlikely that everyone can achieve. I would love to have that motto. Just open the doors and let folks come in. Instead, we have to, because of the face validity of these data, we have no alternative but to balance that. And so for us, the admit rate of 30 to 40% is about as comfortable as we want to be in terms of exclusivity because of the transformational outcomes that we have. We believe fundamentally that the upward social and economic mobility is so utterly powerful from a place like Bentley that we have a moral as well as a strategic obligation to extend that to as broad a sector of the population as possible. But that means you have to fundamentally alter the structure and the processes to ensure the success of those students. And that is not easy. We are a private, conservative, Boston-based, business-oriented university seeking to ensure a level of pluralism that is at least more closely aligned with the society that we serve. And we want to ensure the kind of outcomes that we've discussed. Not an easy task. And certainly, when we talk about changes in the market and the headwinds and technological innovations, I mean, our faculty understand that in the abstract, but when we get it down to this is how we need to teach, these are the outcomes, these are how we need to transfer a body of knowledge to students who are different from what you're used to 5, 7, 10 years ago, that's been a harder conversation. But that is in our DNA. It's a fundamental leadership challenge and an opportunity, and one that we take seriously. And there's really, Stig, no other place at this stage that I'd rather be to do that.
I, for one, my only ask of the audience is the next time the New York Times writes an article about Yale and how well the graduates of Yale do, please send them a note that says, Brent students do just as well, and he admits half the kids who apply, not 1 or 3 or whatever percent it is, because I think that's what it comes down to. It's remarkable work, Brent. And didn't mean to pick on Yale, but I don't know. Any Yaleys in here? But okay, Scott, can you build on it? Can you talk a little bit about how you're trying to measure wage outcomes? You're completely committed to doing that, and also the challenges you face in measuring them well. You're completely willing to do that. You live in a data-scarce environment. None of these college presidents, let's be clear, can easily look up the wages of their own students. It's hard to get that data. It's very hard to know how their students would have been doing in the alternative. And Scott, you're pressing the envelope internally to try to measure as fairly and as accurately as you can. Can you tell us about that and what you're up against?
Yeah, it's amazing what you're doing at Bentley. There's no doubt about that. And I think we've even just tried to take that and go even that much bigger, because we basically said, well, we don't have some of the self-imposed constraints because we don't have classrooms, we don't have a campus, et cetera. So we have to try to do what you're doing at Bentley, but do that for anyone. And so then when you have no admissions criteria and you pretty much can enroll any individual, you have to believe in their innate capacity for learning. You have to believe that if given the opportunity, they have something big to contribute. And then you have to prove that that's true. And so in proving that that's true, what it meant is we actually had to first and foremost obsess about the costs of delivery, because affordability and the flexibility of the design, et cetera, had to be such that you cannot ask someone who's in the bottom 3 quintiles of households in the U.S. And the reason I say that is because 60% of the U.S. lives in a household where the median income is about $30,000. Those individuals are non-consumers in post-secondary education. But the reason it's bottom 3 income quintiles, by the way, there's a major difference. The bottom quintile, you have about a 37% workforce participation living on government programs. And then you have their 3rd and 4th quintiles. 90+% workforce participation, living in hourly wage jobs, trying to figure out how to acquire the knowledge, skill, and ability they need to change their life for the better. We're not figuring out how to take someone making 50 or 60 or coming from a household making $250,000 a year and help them get a six-figure salary. We're trying to take someone from below $35,000 a year making more than $50,000 a year and getting into a point of freedom you like to talk about that says, I now actually have some degree of self-determination around what I'm going to do with my life. So we then simply do this. What is the cost to complete the program? And as like Judy said, it's not only tuition, it's how much time it takes you to complete it. So it's $4,000 roughly flat for a 6-month term, all you can learn, meaning our bachelor's graduates finish their bachelor's degree in 2.5 years for a total cost out of pocket of about $20,000, a little less. Now you have to go get all the actual job data. So, all right, did you get a job? And having gotten that job, what kind of income do you now have compared to what you had before you started your program at WGU? We call this at WGU factored graduate return. You take the income gain, meaning if you were earning $35,000 and now are earning $55,000 a year, that $20,000 increase within 2 years of graduation, we just straight multiplied times the remaining years to graduation. That sum divided by your cost to complete is your multiple of return. At WGU, that's 26 times. You'll earn 26 times more than what it costs you to invest to complete the credential at WGU. And we measure it for all bachelor's programs, master's programs, endorsements, micro-credentials, everything. It doesn't matter whether it's your first credential or second credential, we want to know that there's economic value. And that may go from 10 to 12x on the teacher preparation programs to 50x on cybersecurity or computer science or something like that. But that kind of return isn't saying, how do I get you a 6-figure job as an MBA? That's like, how do you get a $75,000, $100,000 a year job, but you spent like $12,000 getting it instead of $300,000 at my master's alma mater? It's like, there's not a lot of jobs you can get that'll make $300,000 worth it. So that's what
Harvard.
we try to do. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. So there's not a, now last point I'll just simply make is we have to rely on multiple different sources. We utilize a lot of Equifax sources and source data there. We utilize a lot of survey data with Harris and Gallup. Has been a long time, 10-year plus partner now with Gallup to measure this. I'll just give you one last stat for WGU's graduates. Similar 95+% overall employment. But within 2 years of graduation, our graduates are earning more than $22,000 a year. Within 4 years, more than $30,000. At 4 years post-graduation, the average across the whole sector is only $22,000, and our graduates are earning $30,000 more within 4 years of graduation. That's incredible economic return when it only costs you $15,000 to $20,000.
Thank you. And
by the way, anyone is free to copy that. Please do. It works really, really well. So.
And just to make the observation, these are a group of presidents who are committed to this outcome. They're committed to designing for it. Scott's describing work to try to measure it, despite a scarcity of data. Mike, I think it's fair, but correct me if I'm wrong, to say that you live in a state where there's a forerunner of a state policy that's trying to route funding to you based on these basic ideas, that we're looking at the degree to which you improve the economic trajectory of your actual students more than you charge them, which is a pretty simple idea in concept.
That's true, and we have some benefits. One of the benefits is we have good state data. We can actually, better than 95% of our students actually stay in the Texas economy, and so we can measure them through the UI database that is collected by the Workforce Commission. So we can actually, by student, measure their successes. We also, because as a 2-year school, our credentials take a very short amount of time to complete. Some are quick credentials, some are associate degrees, and the cost is more like a community college, so you can get a degree from us for 10 grand or something like that. And our student loan default rate indicates, 60 to 70% of our kids are Pell eligible, so they come from households that have economic challenges to begin with. But when you look at the average earnings they have, we have multiples that are similar to Scott's. They're extraordinarily big. And so we have some benefits there. I think an interesting contrast, though, is we're an open enrollment institution. If you've got a GED or a high school diploma and a Pulse, we'll let you in. Our graduation rate is the best in Texas. So we've gotten really, really good at helping kids get through, and adults. Our average age is 28 years old. So we've gotten really good at that. And the state data systems are helpful.
Yeah. A lot of this conversation distills at the end to data, to institutions, to leaders and policy. We have 4 minutes and 14 seconds. I can wrap in 14 seconds. So that leaves 4 minutes for questions, if there is one. If not, I can continue to ask questions to the panels. But the floor is open if there's a question in the room. And would you just be sure also to address it to somebody? Or I can.
I can do it.
Great. Go ahead.
Mike, maybe I'll address the question to you. I think you just rattled off a lot of really impressive things around ROI, around graduation rates, around doing it with a particular population. So there's a lot of stuff to celebrate. I'm curious, what's next? What do you sort of focus on as how you continue to improve your institution?
I think the way we do the business we do is archaic and needs a lot of reform. A lot of the stuff that Scott has done at WGU is inspiration for how we could do things. I think the work done by Paul LeBlanc up at Southern New Hampshire is another one. There is a lot of mass customization that could occur in the way we teach, and I think things like, why do we do 3 cycles a year? I don't know of anybody who, if you will, produces an outcome in mass like colleges do that would have a manufacturing cycle, if you'll let me use that term, that is 3 cycles a year. That makes no sense at all. It'd either be continuous or much, much shorter. So we have that, we have the means, the use of ed tech. There's all kinds of I think, innovations that are coming our way, and yet we continue to teach like we did when we kept our books in ledger books and with quill pens. And blackboards were the technological breakthrough. I just don't get it. And so we're striving to make it completely different. That's what's next for us.
Why don't you go ahead right there? Just go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. So I guess this is for everyone. Maybe I can address Scott. How do you see AI changing online education? Like, would it look the same in like the next 3 years as it does today? Do you expect big changes?
We hope not. If it does, then we really stink at what we're utilizing technology. So technology will always be an enabler, and in this case, I think truly a catalyst for transformational designs. But I think we have to start with the end in mind and figure out then how to utilize AI. But there's no doubt that we like to talk about it this way, which is WGU was founded at the advent of the internet. And most of us today probably still haven't even fully realized all the benefits of what the internet's actually done. And then we entered the data age, and now that data age is really being amplified through artificial intelligence, machine learning. But if the internet democratizes access to education, enrollment, AI will democratize learning. It will, for us, that's where we see if, in fact, now every individual through the internet can access enrollment. Now every individual will actually advance in their learning and their mastery and proficiency in a way that we haven't had that technology tool before. That's the expectation we would have.
We have 30 seconds. We can do a question in 30 seconds. Someone has to ask it crisply and direct it to one human in the back. Go ahead. Yes.
A lot of the jobs that grads get, they will get after graduation. So how do you think about the services you can provide alumni after they've tossed their pen?
One of the two in the middle has to answer that.
I'm happy to take that.
Good.
We definitely view it as a lifelong commitment, a lifelong relationship. First of all, career advising for alumni. Secondly, for ongoing lifelong learning to come back for short courses. And I hope that they stay in the family and keep employing our students and keep feeding through co-creation what they need in their jobs. So, yeah, it can't stop at graduation.
Thank you, Judy.
Let me add.
Hey, Mike,
You
there's a
can't-
beep. There's a beeper going off behind my
oh,
chair now, and
okay.
it's gonna be bad. They run a very serious operation here. Thank the four of you for being here as leaders in this movement. Great, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Okay.